Radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan, radyo, 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 Katipunan, radyo, Katipunan. The voice of the Blue Eagle, kami di mapipigil sa pagbabalitang tumpak at tama. Buhay atin sa labas ng eskwela, ating ibibida lahat ng pera. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, 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 Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Radyo, Katipunan. Kawal ni Ignacio, Katipunero sugo. Todo sa kayod, tunong at tulong. Lipad na Blue Eagle, galing hiding at tigil.
This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Cholo Sediaren, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munch in with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.
Ikaw, yeah, pwede naman. Okay. Background music. And say, okay, what's poppin' and welcome to Popcorn with Cholo Sediaren. It's up for all things pop, where we talk about all things pop culture here in the Philippines and the rest of the globe. And of course, we are all still in our homes because we are still on quarantine. So this is a special report from Popcorn outside our regular programming in response to current events in the country, specifically the threat against our very own freedoms with the shutdown of ABS-CBN broadcasts on television and radio. So before we begin our special coverage on this whole topic, I'll introduce my co-hosts for the day. You've heard all of them on the show before, and I'll just do a brief introduction. Of course, let's welcome back Paula. Hey, Paula.
Hey.
We also have Erika on here,
Hello. Hi, guys.
and we have Mr. Rambo. Welcome back, Ram.
Hello.
Rambo reports. And we also have our Swifty. Swifty talaga. Reg is also here with us. Hello, Reg.
Hello.
So, kamusta kayo lahat? I mean, it's all kind of like a really tough time as well for everyone, especially with what happened yesterday.
Yeah. Heavy.
Mostly angry. I think that's just the general sentiment that I'm sure everyone in this group is feeling right now.
So, I mean, I guess we're all up to speed, hopefully, on everything that has happened. We'll just give a quick discussion on the events that transpired. So, I mean, we talked about this earlier in the year, mga February, I think, na yun nga, there was a lot of talk about the ABS-CBN shutdown and all the talks in the Congress. And, you know, there were a lot of gatherings as well to come together to help the company, the network, continue on with their service. And, you know, the corona pandemic happened and everyone thought na parang, okay, maybe bigyan na provisions to continue on, especially in these times that we're facing, and that you know, it's not the most the biggest priority to like shut down a network in a sense na, you know, even with especially with what we are all experiencing now, we need such platforms to be able to be updated with the news. And just yesterday, May 4th, the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC, issued a cease and desist order against ABS-CBN after the legislative franchise expired on May 4th. So, quick facts lang naman. So, they just cited the Republic Act on the radio control law, na saying that a network can't operate without having obtained a franchise from the Congress, which has expired nga the same 2 days ago. And yun nga, ABS-CBN no longer has a valid and subsisting congressional franchise as required by Act number 3846. So after receipt of that response, NTC is saying that ABS-CBN can respond, and they should schedule a case of hearing at the earliest time after the enhanced community quarantine is lifted by the government. So aside from that, a lot of things have also transpired in the House of, such as House Speaker Alan Cayetano said naman na, you know, given the everything that's happening, that he assured that ABS-CBN will not shut down even if its franchise lapses. So ang dami na nangyari in Congress, including the Cayetano and Palawan Representative Franz Alvarez earlier sent a letter to NTC saying na they should grant provisional authority nga to ABS-CBN effective on May 4. But at the same time, Solicitor General Jose Calida, who earlier filed the warranto petition against ABS-CBN, yun nga, he's also sort of, what's the word? There is a threat against ABS-CBN, or a threat to NTC to stop the franchise. So that's kind of like the facts behind it. And yun nga, yesterday, May 5th, at around 8 p.m., after TV Patrol aired, ABS-CBN shut off their transmitters and went all black after the sign off. So aside from ABS-CBN, the channel DZMM radio and MOR radio have also shut down, but ABS-CBN other channels, cable channel A and C, along with online platforms such as the websites and social media, along with the I Want streaming service, are still operational up to this day. So just a rundown for people who aren't quite familiar with what happened, but I guess it's where our conversation begins regarding this. So what do you guys think about everything that has happened? For me, ano lang, as someone who doesn't necessarily work for the company or directly work for the company, you know, ako kasi parang it's been a part of my life, ABS-CBN, in one way or another, through entertainment man, or, you know, I've also interned there for a short time, and even up to my professional life right now, na I still go to ABS-CBN and work with a lot of people who work there. So, I mean, a lot of people are affected by this for sure. The 11,000 employees, not just that, but their families, and also everyone else who doesn't have the internet such as we do to gain access to information. They're the most vulnerable to this, and it's just really sad to have the government use this vulnerable time for all of us to like do this and have a political move pa amidst the pandemic. I mean, that's really my opinion on this, or my take on this, but I'm sure the rest of us have the same sentiments naman.
Gusto kong dagdagan yung sinabi mo, Cholo, and I think it's really nice that you opened up with how ABS-CBN has been such a big part of your life. This is really something that's important. This is really something big. ABS-CBN, the biggest media network in the Philippines. Imagine, for example, half of American networks being wiped out, as in off air. It's the same as here in the Philippines, because ABS-CBN basically owns 50% of the content and the news that people consume. ABS-CBN. Kung may nakausap kang taga Maynila o taga probinsya, alam nilang ABS-CBN. It's really a household name. It's it's actually described once sa isang hearing, sa Senate hearing, I believe, na it's like you pulled out all of the San Miguel beer bottles out of all Filipino shelves. It's that big. Kasi ang daming mga tao talagang umaasa sa ABS-CBN. And also to contextualize this, ang ganda rin na sinabi mo, Cholo, na the government is doing this at a time when the country is vulnerable, when everybody is suffering collective trauma under the coronavirus pandemic. So there's not much room for public outcry kasi sarado ang public spaces. Hindi ka makakalabas to protest, and Filipinos are known to actually go out and show their sentiments. Pero ngayon na may pandemic, hindi magawa ito. And this is part of a broader attack against the press. Kasi kitang-kita natin na, well, the ABS-CBN is not the first. And it wouldn't be the last. But ABS-CBN, as the biggest media company, is the biggest precedent. As in, if you can do that to ABS-CBN, kung pwede mo yung gawin sa ABS-CBN, pwede mo yung gawin sa ibang media companies, ibang media networks. So, merong chilling effect sa media industry, sa journalists, yung ginawa ng government sa pagsasara sa ABS-CBN. A part of it has caused fear, but I guess the general sentiment now is anger, rage. Last night, sadness. As in, maraming nag-tweet sa journalist friends ko na sinasabi, tonight we will cry, tonight we will mourn, but tomorrow we will fight back. We will push back.
And if I may add then, I also believe this is a blatant attack on the poor. I remember a friend of mine, we were talking about it yesterday, and she said, grabe, parang nakakalimutan nila na minsan ABS-CBN talagang nakakaabot sa malalayong lugar na walang signal sa GMA, walang signal sa TV5, walang signal even for data. That's the only thing they can consume, and that's the only way they can be updated with the coronavirus pandemic. And sinabi ko sa kanya, well, I think that this is a calculated move. I definitely believe that this thought hasn't escaped their mind. I feel like part of it then is they really want to cripple the masses, especially in terms of how much information can reach them. And that really, really saddened me last night. Kasi these people are also the most vulnerable, di ba ngayon? Exactly. So, yeah, that's my stance on all of this first and foremost. It's an attack on press freedom and it's an attack on the poor. Those two things.
Yeah, I vehemently agree. I think we tend to forget just how many people in the country don't have access to electricity, television, that battery-operated radio is the only source of information and entertainment that they have. And in a time when we need constant information and even entertainment to help us cope with such a big struggle in our lives, parang you're crippling so much more than you realize by removing ABS-CBN and its radio networks off the air. So many people rely on these, especially in the provinces where they have their own local broadcast, their own local news. Syempre, hindi naman tayo pwedeng lahat nakarely lang sa national news. And ABS-CBN provides such vital information for everyone. And ayun, parang iniisip ko rin like the psychological impact na everyday ang lala na nangyayari around you, and parang minsan you just need to rely on something familiar and something to entertain you kahit ilang oras lang or ilang minutes lang every day. And ABS-CBN provided that to so many Filipinos. So ngayon parang we'll just wallow in sadness. Let's say na kahit na may ibang stations, iba pa rin kasi pag familiar sa'yo eh. Iba pa rin pag pamilya mo, di ba? When it's something that you've grown up with and find sense of comfort with, parang to take that away from you is such a big hit, such a big blow. I just don't think many people realize just how big of an impact it is. Not just, on the news, but like culturally and emotionally for so many Filipinos. That's me.
And aside from the news din kasi, parang the news is a part of it, pero yung ngayon na panahon na kailangan ng tao ng entertainment na mga programa, kahit iba na yung mga programa, binabalik lang nila yung mga old programs nila. I mean, it's sort of relief in a sense na people need this kind of relief at this time, and it's being taken away from them kasi hindi naman nga lahat may internet talaga. Swerte tayo na may ganito tayong platform to have entertainment, but not everyone has the same access as we do, and it's beyond us, beyond the 11,000 families, and it's really, yun nga, not just nationwide, pero worldwide din with TFC.
Yeah.
May post ako nabasa sa friend ko kahapon na they rely on TFC, yung parang broadcast ng Bandila on their side of the globe to be updated with Philippine news also. So, it really changes everyone's, routine and also the way they get things. So, it's really sad nga to have this sort of removed and so quickly without any announcements. Same night they announced, parang okay, tanggal na kayo.
Good thing you brought up entertainment, Cholo, kasi I can't help but think na ABS-CBN, like full credits to them. They have also brought extremely important issues to the mainstream media na hindi talaga pinag-uusapan dati. They would especially talk about LGBT issues din sa mga pelikula nila at sa mga teleserye nila na, to be honest, these people have a preconceived notion of how LGBT characters are. But then ABS-CBN did come up with certain programs to really break that mold and to show the Filipino people na parang this is, diba, this is how like in depth and how much these LGBT lives actually matter. And these are brought to the furthest reaches of the country. And then ngayon biglang mawawala na siya. Sobrang sayang talaga.
And Regine, would you like to add anything on this?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna jump off of the points that you guys raised regarding ABS-CBN's impact and also regarding, of course, its entertainment circle, no, and its entertainment worth. Apart from, I think a lot of people have been pointing out that, or a lot of people who are pro the government in this equation try to paint this as an issue that doesn't have anything to do with press freedom, because everyone is affected, not just people who are in the press, and because there are supposedly other alternatives. And you can actually see now that there is also a coordinated effort online to paint this picture of ABS-CBN as a kind of errant business going against the law, so and so. I mean, we've seen the posts detailing the copy-paste spiels on Facebook, as well as hashtag yes to ABS-CBN Shutdown. And I just like to point out that last month, when Twitter took down hundreds of accounts, that particular hashtag was one of the suspicious online trends where it had found a lot of spammy accounts, which later turned out to be enough for Twitter to take them down en masse. That is to say, hashtags like this in particular, are not organic. And Rappler also has a longer, more extensive feature in that on which online trends are organic and which weren't. And it seems to be clear that there's this kind of, coordinated, manipulated online machinery at work that tries to paint a picture of ABS-CBN as exactly this errant company, and that its closure is something that the Filipino masses want and that the Filipino masses need. But precisely because of all the points that you guys raised earlier, precisely because of how ABS-CBN is sometimes the only source of news in some parts of the country, whether it be through radio or whether it be through television, because it's in some places the only station which provides news in the local language, and precisely because of its entertainment impact, as well as its impact in terms of like relief or distributing relief goods and the like. There is much cause to doubt whether its closure is something that the Filipino masses actually want. Even lawmakers who were aligned with the president now seem to be kind of hesitant about the closure or about the closure of ABS-CBN because they do recognize the impact that this have and that this has, and possibly also the impact that this will hold over, their re-election campaigns or what have you. It's yeah. So there. I'll say that for now, among other sentiments. Yeah.
And you're right, I agree. With the regards to the parang coordinated scheme in a sense. I think it further opens up the debate we've been having all this time in this administration, where our parang what is right and wrong under the law, what is above the law, what is not under the law, what is right or wrong morally, 'di ba? There's always this fight na. There's this debate between that na parang, oh, they're not following kasi the franchise, kaya tama lang na alisin sila. Pero at the same time, at this time nga that we're experiencing, ano nga ba yung tama na sundin? Na tama ba na tanggalin sila dahil lang na it's in the
Yeah.
law na ganyan? Or tama ba na payagan silang magpatuloy dahil kailangan ito ng mga tao na who the government in itself is serving dapat, 'di ba?
I like what you raised right now, Cholo and Regine, yung sinasabi nyo na actually this is a central message right now by the propaganda machine that's controlled by the government. And this is a message that's been repeated over and over again. Those who break the law should be punished. That's a central message of this administration. President Duterte is the punisher. Let's remember, that's how he won the 2016 election. And that's a message that's being followed up right now with the president, the punisher, punishing people who do not follow the law. So people are tweeting, or trolls are tweeting. The repeated message is nobody is above the law. Nobody is above the law. But let's put that into context. Who enforces the law? Who implements the law? Who interprets the law? These are the men close to the president. Solicitor General Jose Calida has been filing cases, and people are already saying, legal experts are saying that his interpretation of the law is a case of legal acrobatics. The Supreme Court is dominated by appointees by President Duterte and people who are described to be loyal to him. The Philippine National Police is extremely loyal to the president. And even a lot of lawmakers and senators. So when you ask for comment, so is the interpretation of the law correct? They would say, oh, it's okay. So it is a culture. It's a culture that we're living already with, that the understanding of the rule of law, as in how experts are actually describing it, is a corrosion, the death of the rule of law under the administration. Kasi nga, kung ano lang ang gustong gawin ng administrasyon, gagawin nilang papel. It's so easy to say that, okay, I want to close this down. There is a law. I can interpret it this way, and I'll file a case in a court that's favorable to me, and I will win. That's the system that's being done right now. And it just so happened that right now, the target is ABS-CBN. We've seen this happen to drug suspects. We've seen this happen to Rappler. We've seen this happen to critics of President Duterte. You have Laila de Lima. You have Senator Trillanes. So this is not something that's happening in a vacuum. When you say that we are just enforcing the rule of law, we have to ask, who's implementing it? Whose rule of law are we actually following right now?
And to add to that, I mean, yun nga, we've seen time and again na ang daming ang ways na nabebend nila yung actual law in a sense na, okay, ito nga mga bagay na to in the law, but in the sense na what is right or wrong morally or what is good for the people, do they actually implement that in their governance, diba? So you're really, you were on point in that, bringing that up.
Thank you, Charlie.
And again, like,
Also,
how big of a
yeah, okay,
priority
you can go
Oops,
first.
sorry.
Okay, go lang.
No, but like at the same time, let's say ABS-CBN did violate so many of these laws, which they have proven naman that they haven't. But how much of a priority should this be during a pandemic? That this is what you're focusing on. That closing down a network is your highest priority, the NTC, rather than providing vital information to majority of Filipinos. Like, I think that's what frustrates me the most. Like, fine, if you wanted to pursue this after COVID has at least been settled, but right now when the government should be doing its best to at least mass test everyone, they can't even do that. Instead, they choose to do this to cripple more Filipinos, like even more. Go ahead.
Exactly. And it's a good thing that you brought up the pandemic, because I can't help but think that the further this goes on, parang our pandemic situation is just going to get worse because we are dealing with an uninformed populace, di ba? Kung totoosin, I firmly believe that all the trolls that keep saying na pasaway ang mga Pilipino kaya sila lumalabas, etc., etc., these people are essentially thinking of their best interest in mind and their own survival because they have nothing else to think about anymore. So the fact that the government shut down ABS-CBN purposefully chose to cripple a huge chunk of the Philippine population in terms of the information they can get, it's really appalling talaga. And I really, really wonder how they can possibly go about containing this virus if the people themselves aren't informed in their own homes, di ba?
Yeah.
Baka sasabihin ng mga neighbors nila, ay pwede na lumabas, it's safe. But of course, they have no means of truly verifying this by the news kasi wala silang mapapanood eh. So ang mangyayari, it's gonna be a 50-50 situation in their heads na parang, okay, sige, maybe I can go out, I trust my neighbor. But as a matter of fact, the neighbor could be an unknowing purveyor of fake news. Diba? It spitballs. And I think it will spitball even faster from here.
Yeah. Agree. I think especially now, I think information and news are almost as vital as like food and water in our day-to-day lives. We are desperate for news to be able to just live, you know, kasi like wrong information can actually mean death to a large chunk of our population now. Kung lumabas ka lang na hindi pala pwede and hindi mo alam, pwede kang mamatay. Diba?
Exactly.
And
yes.
how is that your fault when the government stops you from being informed anyway?
And it's really opening up another big issue of where does the government's loyalty lie? Because kaka-announce lang din a few days ago na okay, they're allowing the reopening of Chinese pogos in the country, for example, and how does that contribute to the nation and to the people and how they're dealing with this pandemic compared to yun nga ABS-CBN's impact on the daily lives of people. And you know, if you talk about taxes as well, Pogo has around 50 billion yata of unpaid taxes towards the government, and ABS-CBN, the facts say that they paid much more than that in the past how many years as well.
Okay, maybe I'll just weigh in before engaging with the question that you raised about pogos, right? Because a lot of people have also been bringing it up. I just wanted to add on to what you guys said earlier about how the legal acrobatics here are really meant to obfuscate the facts at hand and to distract from how appalling the move of shutting down ABS-CBN is. Not just because there are 11,000 jobs that are on the line and therefore 11,000 families that are also on the line, but also because of millions of viewers will be deprived of information. Earlier today, there was news that Joey Salceda of Bicol already said that they're estimating that there will be a couple of thousand more COVID infections because of the closure of ABS-CBN. Now, we can't be sure about these numbers, of course, or how exact or accurate they will be. But for sure, there will be a likely impact of this on the non-partisan state of affairs. For sure, there will be, because of deprivation of information or the lack of reliable information, a more possibility of a spread of the virus. And this isn't even about, political coverage or criticism of the government. By shutting down ABS-CBN, they're shutting down not just ABS-CBN's coverage that is supposedly political or critical of the government, but they're also shutting down vital information like, hygiene, like updating people on whether or not we are really, we're really flattening the curve. You're right. Like one of you guys mentioned earlier that people will probably think that it's safe to go out maybe, or they'll trust more unreliable sources of information, and that's going to result in more possibly more cases of COVID coming up. So that's one thing that's particularly alarming about this situation. With regard to the question on pogos, so if I could just like open up that conversation, it's been very clear, I guess, from the onset that there seems to be a kind of selectivity in terms of the application of the law, so to speak, and also in terms of, you know, who the government seems to or is reported to favor and is reported to single out. You know, a number of lawmakers, not necessarily even opposition lawmakers, have also raised concerns about pogos in the country. And yesterday I just reread a report from Asian Nikkei Review that talks about how a number of these pogos aren't even registered in the Philippines, and issues like that. So maybe your readers might want to look into those concerns as well. There is also a lot of labor issues or concerns that also cloud the pogo industry, not just for Filipinos at hand, but also even for the Chinese migrant workers who come here. And Rappler has also done reporting on that as well. So there's a lot of literature, I guess, that people or your listeners can look into when reading up on the pogo industry here. So I recall, in relation to what you said, Cholo, that Opposition Senator Risa Hontiveros also weighed in on this, on how a Filipino company is being shut down in the midst of a pandemic. One that you can arguably say is definitely an essential industry, an essential business, because it provides us information about the pandemic. Meanwhile, pogos are being allowed to operate because even though, you know, it's not a particularly essential operation in this time of, you know, a health crisis. A lot of people might think that these two are unrelated, but it kind of still points to a picture of where exactly the government priorities are. So there.
But
Just to
I
add,
mean,
go.
Ram, go ahead.
I wanted to add sa Pogo issue. Again, I wanted to zoom out dito sa Pogo, people are actually raising that there's an unfair treatment for fellow Filipinos dahil hindi ine-enforce na maayos yung sa Pogos at saka hindi nire-regulate yung Pogos as compared to Filipinos. Again, this is part of a bigger narrative of how the government has reportedly always been favoring China. This pivot to China is something that's central to the government's foreign policy. Itong nangyari sa Pogos ngayon na hindi rin bago under the coronavirus. Just 2 weeks ago, as in April 23, we reported, and lots of outlets reported, na tinarget ang isang Navy ship ng Chinese warship. By targeting, I mean tinutukan ng mga baril ng Chinese ship ang ating Philippine Navy. And we condemned it. Pero ang tanong nakasunod, sapat ba yun? Kinondemn lang ng ating TFA at saka ng government on paper. Why can't we also implement the law? A law that we are asserting sa West Philippine Sea. I was supposed to say South China Sea, but West Philippine Sea. And yung mismong regulation din ng mga Chinese nationals na hindi sumusunod sa immigration. Maraming mga Chinese nationals ang may expired visas daw. Di ba merong full-blown investigation dito sa Senate pero hindi rin natuloy na maayos kasi nga nagkaroon ng pandemic. Tapos, meron ring allegations kay President Duterte about being relaxed when it comes to treating Chinese drug lords. As in, this is part of a bigger picture too of how the government prioritizes enforcing the law. Bakit ngayon ang bibo-bibo nyo sa pag-enforce sa ABS-CBN? Bakit parang ni-railroad nyo to? Pero kung sa Pogo o sa ibang mga Chinese alleged law violators, bakit hindi nyo maimbestigahan ng ganito rin kabilis? Bakit hindi kayo mag-assert ng rule of law when it comes to them?
But yun nga, it's really a bigger narrative and something that we should probably touch on in other episodes. But going back to the ABS-CBN shutdown nga, parang I also want to ask Rambo and Reg specifically, syempre being in the field of journalism and having been there for a while, and see Rambo is an Rappler who also experienced the same sort of shutdown or the same parang
Mhm.
fight, parang the government being aggressive against their publication. I mean, how different is this, or how similar is this, and how do you think it will affect the nation, of course, and the journalists and freedom of the press as well.
Okay. There's a lot of moving parts right now with ABS-CBN, but from the beginning, as in how it was enforced, as in mabilis, di ba? Biglaan na lang naglabas ang NTC ng order na dapat sarhan ng ABS-CBN. Ang Rappler, hindi naman kami binigyan ng closure order kaagad. Hindi kaagad sinabi na this is effective immediately, you have to close, you have to stop publishing. Walang ganong order sa amin ng SEC at ang government. We were given by the government chance to comment. Pero minadali pa rin eh. Sinabi na you don't have a franchise. You don't have a license to operate. You can't continue operating as a business. You can't be Rappler. At ayun, agad-agad kaming tinanggal sa Malacanang, sa coverage ng Malacanang. Hindi kami pinapalapit kay President Duterte. And we're lucky, yung mga reporters namin na sa ibang beats hindi naman kami pinapalabas. Pero every time na nandyan si President Duterte, we can cover it kasi hindi kami recognized as a legitimate news outlet, which is, problematic kasi nagtatrabaho naman kami. Sa ABS-CBN, hindi pa natin alam kung paano ililimit yung kanilang coverage. Pero I think at the core of this, it's the same. Talagang, it's the same case of bending the law in favor of the government's project against independent and critical journalists. Again, for context, this is ABS-CBN we're talking about. This is actually not extremely surprising kasi nung 2016 pa lang galit na si President Duterte sa kanila. He has been threatening ABS-CBN ever since he won as president. Kasi nga, di ba, nagtatampo siya na hindi in-air yung kanyang ads. Tapos in-air ng ABS-CBN yung ads against yung kay Trillanes, yung ads against Duterte. So, galit siya doon and hindi na niya pinakawalan yon. Tapos si Kalida na lang mismo yung nag-investiga. Sa Rappler naman, we've been publishing critical stories about the administration and they haven't been taking it with how officials should take it. Kasi nga, di ba, officials should not be onion skin, pero sila, nagagalit sila. And I guess in that pattern, we are not confident to say that this is the last time they are going to do this, na ABS-CBN na yung huli nilang gagawin. Kasi yung Rappler nga, ang unang sinabi nila, Rappler sinasampulan lang. Ngayon, mas malaking sample ang ABS-CBN sa ibang reporters. Kaya talagang it doesn't only affect Rapplers but also other reporters sa ibang newsrooms.
And with regard to that, syempre, i-bring up din natin this is not the first time ABS-CBN has been shut down. And with our history, di ba, it was first shut down in September 21st, 1972. And this might be another, the repeat of history na this is just the first step. But that also opens up the conversation nga na with what happened before, people rallied. I mean, of course, right now, wala tayong panahon or wala tayong space to do that. But it was also one of the major events in that time of martial law that really led people to get together and to, voice their opinions and dissent against the government. But aside from that aspect, syempre, Rappler is one side of the story as well. And I would like to ask Reg then. Syempre, Reg is with the Washington Post, and that's another angle din naman of being Filipino working for an international publication. So how is it different from what you've experienced, for example, in the local field of journalism, and now that you're covering for an international publication, and how is that experience going right now, Reg?
Okay. Yeah, so thanks for that question. For sure, the context of reporting for the foreign press is different because since I report to editors in the US and particularly in our base in Hong Kong, there is pretty much no pressure at all on our part to bend to any possible threat from the government, because my editors and my company doesn't respond to the state, and we're not run by businessmen who have interests or ties here in the Philippines. So that's one particular thing that I guess complicates the media economy in the Philippines, and which is also what makes it sometimes very difficult for the local press to close ranks. I saw this post somewhere on Twitter yesterday that, yesterday it was Rappler, today it was ABS-CBN, and you could be next tomorrow. For sure, one thing, whether or not corporate media entities or the businessmen who actually own media companies want to recognize it. One attack on the press is an attack on everyone. It's not just like in terms of like investments or stuff like that. For sure, it's going to have real consequences, especially now in a time like the pandemic. And this is something that I see reporters on the ground, at least rank and file employees, recognize, because you'll see it in their online posts. Even if their companies won't, issue official statements, maybe they will definitely lend out or shout out their support to their colleagues in their competing companies. So that's one particular thing that I admire about the Filipino press, and I find it such a privilege and honor to work with such great colleagues in the industry. One other thing that I wanted to point out with regards to the point raised earlier about how this is going to affect press freedom in the Philippines. For sure, a lot of people will, to kind of contextualize things a bit on a macro scale in terms of press freedom. Ram is right. This is definitely not the first time we've seen attacks on or intimidation toward the press. And I just like to point out also that we slipped a couple of places down on the World Press Freedom Index. The Philippines is still considered one of the worst countries to be for journalists. It's still considered one of the worst countries in terms of the justice rate, or in terms of the conviction rate for murdered journalists. And this is something that, we see really at play here, especially at a time like this. Now, suddenly 11,000 people, 11,000 people's jobs are totally affected. So this is kind of sad, knowing that the Philippines was once, or sometimes still is, considered the freest press in Asia. But this is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And that is how we should kind of contextualize how the media operates in the Philippines. Because a lot of people think that because we have some semblance of democracy, in the sense that, other media outlets are still being allowed to operate, or in the sense that, people are still allowed to say what they can online. We supposedly don't have, strict fake news laws, unlike other countries in Southeast Asia. Then it means that the press is free, or then it means that people still have freedom of speech or freedom of expression. There's a bit of a problem sometimes in how people spin that view, because just because other media outlets are still being allowed to operate, it doesn't mean that there's no attack on the press, or it doesn't mean that there's no there is no intimidation that doesn't currently exist. There needs to be, for a vibrant democracy, a government or supporters of the government can't, pick and choose what media outlets exist and which don't. That's precisely the lifeblood of a democracy, that there is a variation of different points of view. And it's so difficult in the current context of the Philippines because, as I said, because of social media, there seems to be this kind of idea that, we still have free speech. But then again, when you look at the context here, the internet in the Philippines is pumped with or polluted with a lot of propaganda, with a lot of online machinery. And this is why the free press is more important now than ever, because we need independent sources of information. We need independent verification. So there, yeah.
I just wanted to ask what you guys think should be the response of other media agencies in the Philippines, particularly big stations like GMA, TV5, the like. What should their response be given ABS-CBN's shutdown?
Sa akin?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start muna for ako mag-rant, Joe. I guess, what can I say na hindi masyadong inflaming? I guess I think something that should happen is solidarity. As in, that's essential. Because this is an existential threat against journalists. This is basically the government telling all of journalists na if you report critically against the government, if you cross the line, we are going to close you down. Kasi si President Duterte mismo nagsabi na, kayo, tingnan nyo ano mangyayari sa inyo. It was a threat. And it's not only for ABS-CBN, but everybody else. At kung nare-recognize talaga ng lahat ng professional journalists yun, dapat tatayo tayo sa kanila. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung pinakang dapat gawin, kung mag-protest ba, kailangan bang maglabas ng statement, kailangan bang merong certain kind of coverage na ilagay. Pero I'm hoping na at most sa capacity namin at saka sa bawat isang journalist, dapat merong ginagawa para ma-recognize itong problemang ito. Ayoko rin namang sabihin na okay, lahat ng journalists, let's go do this. Let's post a statement. Let's condemn the government. Kasi iba rin talaga eh. A big issue which was raised earlier by Regine is media ownership. There's a context of the owners of these companies possibly being linked with the government. There are owners who are afraid of being persecuted. We already saw this happening to the Inquirer. Diba? Kinasuhan ng mga Prieto. And this can happen to other media organizations, yung mga owners nila. And if there's no funding, there is no publishing. So it's also a tricky process for all journalists here in the Philippines to stand together, especially since meron talagang attacks in all levels. So itong ABS-CBN nga lang is just the tip of the iceberg. Makikita natin yung attacks behind the scenes against the people who own the networks. Makikita natin yung attacks against journalists themselves, yung mga trolls, ina-atake sa private messages, may mga threats, and yung mismong pagdedegrade ng legitimacy ng journalists. This repeated messaging of trolls saying na bayaran kayong media dahil nagpapublish kayo. Bayaran kayo dahil critical kayo sa gobyerno. So I guess I want my fellow journalists to just show their support. Kahit nga private messages lang sa ABS-CBN o sa mga journalists na iba, yung malaking tulong na yun. Solidarity, showing that these people, 11,000 workers, journalists with ABS-CBN, are not alone.
I'm also, I also agree with Ram. It's very difficult to kind of diagnose like a single course of action for people in the media industry, especially considering how intertwined the local media economy is with corporate interests. So sometimes you might want to speak out on an individual or personal level, especially for people working in the local press, but then they have a limited ability to do so because they're under pressure from higher ups or the like. So it's very difficult. But Ram is right. At the end of the day, I think what also matters is that we are with them in terms of at least personal moral support, at least in terms of reaching out, PMing friends who work in the industry, checking up on them, with regard to how we can move forward to this collectively. There are also organizations, of course, that release statements that record as well these kinds of possible attacks in the press and stuff like that. So in the context of the foreign press, the association that I'm a part of, Foreign Correspondents Association of the Philippines, also released a statement um, in support of ABS-CBN, and so has the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines, as well as a number of other media organizations or media groups. So being an active part of these kinds of associations also, which kind of monitor what goes on in terms of developments in press freedom, is also probably another way that we can go about responding to issues like this.
Thank you for mentioning that the organizations you're a part of, Reg, actually uh, sent out statements, very public statements, no, in support of ABS-CBN, because speaking as a citizen who tries to keep herself updated with the news, I noticed that because of social media then, if we're bombarded with a lot of information that essentially will not benefit us during this anxiety-inducing pandemic, people tend to jump to conclusions, and they tend to live in fear, kumbaga, na parang, oh my God, okay, if they can do this to ABS-CBN, that means other outlets possibly can't do their jobs to the best of their ability. And at least these organizations that you mentioned, Reg, actually showed that they were in solidarity with ABS-CBN, and their work will proceed as normal, even if, or at least as normal can possibly be, no, during this situation. So it gives citizens a lot of comfort, actually, to see journalists really band together and tell each other and tell us, of course, that they will still be in pursuit of the truth, and they will still try to inform as many people as they possibly can about what's going on.
And I guess to add to everyone's statements, then I guess it's really also a call to us citizens. I mean, si Rambo kasi and Reg are in the journalism field. Kami, we're also in the media, but we're more citizens in this aspect na to really not stop talking about it and discussing it on our own platforms. Although we're not completely sure na our message gets across to
Yeah.
parang the biggest audience out there, but we do have our own circles to get to try to persuade that this is what's right, this is what we think is moral, and this is what we believe the government should be doing. Because yun nga, time and again, we've been speaking about this the past month in terms of the corona pandemic, na you know, we see that our opinions, our dissent online is being responded to by the government through their own channels. Kunwari, i-mention dun sa weekly press con or whatever you want to call that. Or, you see that our words are not just random words on the internet that nobody will respond to, but something that they actually still might be terrified of, na we're not backing down. We're still continuing to fight in our own ways. We're standing in solidarity with our friends in the media and our friends in journalism, our friends in the press. So I mean, I guess it's really just that. And I think the bigger ano din is to reiterate that everything is political. I mean, some people would say that, you know, a TV show or a movie might not be political, or my thoughts on Facebook might not be political, but everything you put out there has politics in it. I mean, ito medyo sidetrack a bit, but last night kasi I read this post on the Hamilton Philippines group. There was kasi with regards to the ABS-CBN shutdown, there was a post that says history has its eyes on you, President Duterte. And there was this girl who commented na, I went to this page for memes. I didn't think that there would be politics in here. And then now everyone's attacking me for my politics. And people are like, don't you realize that Hamilton as a musical is a musical about politics and about the government, and it's something that we can apply to our everyday lives. I think we have to reiterate that to a lot of people that media or mga art is not just something for our entertainment, but also something to push messages out there. Now you can't just
Yeah.
completely disregard those messages just because you like the actor, just because you like the music, just because you like the costumes or whatever. But it's something that we should participate in, that and that we should be aware that everything is political. Musicals are political. This podcast is political, even though we are a pop culture podcast, right? So it's just something that we have to reiterate and let people know that, you know, we shouldn't be silent about these things and that we should be aware of the political implications of everything we see and we read and we put out there.
Definitely, Cholo. If I could add to that, there's definitely no other bigger demonstration of how deeply intertwined politics is with entertainment and with pop culture than with the actual closure of ABS-CBN.
Hamilton.
Mhm.
It's the total demonstration of
Yeah.
why these things are deeply connected, and they've always been. I
Yeah.
mean, like, ang Provinciano, for example, it's a pop culture show, but like so many of its stars have run for positions in politics, and they've won. So there, I also saw that post, by the way, on the Hamilton fan page.
It's so
Um,
funny. Like, of
it's
all
really
the media content for you to complain about being political, talagang Hamilton yung magagalit ka. A show that's literally all about politics. Are you
Yeah,
kidding?
and I kind of have a theory about why this is a problem for Filipinos. And I also had like a similar frustration because I'm part of a campus journalism group on Facebook where people basically ask for tips about schools press conferences, parang tips for feature writing, tips for managing a school publication. And last night, somebody also similarly posted on the group something along the lines of, if you're in favor of the ABS-CBN shutdown, just leave this group. You're not like a true campus journalist because you don't understand the essence of freedom of the press, etc., etc. So now people started accusing this person of being elitist, of being prescriptive, and of, um, you know, like not being true to his principles because while he's saying he's for freedom of speech, he's shutting down
Mhm.
other people's freedom of speech just because they oppose him, etc., etc. Um, but it seems to fly over everybody's heads, at least for the most part, based on the comments. And people commenting were largely high school students,
Mhm.
or sometimes college students or campus journalists, or for the most part, older school paper advisors, ng mga high school teachers and stuff like that. So it seemed to fly over a lot of commenters' heads that there is a fundamental difference in terms of upholding freedom of speech between a guy, like a random guy on a Facebook group who says, okay, if you don't agree, just show yourselves the leave group button, and an actual government that will shut down a network that services millions of viewers.
Yeah.
And I think in part, this is due to a failure in our media literacy and education system.
Definitely.
People don't seem to recognize the fallacies in the arguments being put forward um, by propaganda, by government propaganda, basically. A lot of people here seem very averse to politics, Cholo. Like, like the slight mention of politics na parang, hala, like, I don't want to talk about it. Let's just be happy, and the like. Because a lot of people who were responding to the post on that particular post in the campus journal group were also like that. They were saying stuff like, oh, let's just respect each other's opinion, let's be peaceful, etc., etc. Pa-pacifist, pa-neutral na takes. But there's not enough recognition, I think, in terms of media literacy level, that false neutrality is actually complacent with propaganda.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right? That
And okay, go on.
yeah, that there's something fundamentally wrong with saying that the press should not be free, or that certain press organizations should not be free. And then when somebody counters you, you say, no, I need to have my freedom of speech. There's a contradiction there, and people should recognize that. And I feel that should definitely come at the level of basic education. So yeah, there. That's my rant about it.
Yeah. And anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I really believe that neutrality has no place in responsible journalism because as a writer, you choose to pursue the truth. You choose to write about something that may be detrimental to one party or advantageous to the other simply because it's your responsibility as a journalist. So I really have no idea why these people you mentioned have been championing free speech and neutrality at the same time because there's some sort of dissonance there. Eh. Kumbaga, the free speech that we're trying to fight for is essentially the right for these media companies to give us the pure truth about our situations. So I really don't understand why someone would choose neutrality purely, I guess, or mostly from what I've been seeing, purely from an emotional standpoint, simply because they don't want toxicity, they don't want to be bombarded by reality. When in fact, if journalism is what you want to pursue, at least for the meantime in a campus setting, well, if you're too neutral, tama naman si poster, baka this isn't the industry for you because neutrality simply isn't truly, really, truly embedded in journalism. I really don't see it.
I just wanted to add to that about neutrality. Usually, the people who are saying that we have to be neutral, these are people who are speaking from a privileged position because they have the
Definitely.
privilege, the luxury to not take a stand because the issue is not touching them. Once you're part of the issue, once it touches you, it's inevitable for you to know what is right and what is wrong. So it's impossible for you to be neutral. Yun yung aking addition.
I want to bounce off of that also in terms of neutrality, but in the world of advertising. I think brands are one of the biggest purveyors of wanting to stay neutral to issues such as these because typically they're not affected. But I think with the ABS-CBN shutdown, what we don't actually look into also is how it affects advertising and our brands, the sales. ABS-CBN is probably the biggest media company in this country. So a lot of our media spendings in advertising goes to airing commercials on ABS-CBN. So now with that gone, brands have a whole channel gone to their access, whole audience of people that they can no longer contact or inform them about their products. And I think now, especially with this, brands, ads, advertising in general, is, a medium that has a much wider reach than most people realize, must take a stand or at least give their POV as to what's happening and how it impacts them. Because an impact on advertising is also an impact on our economy as well. So ayun, it's a struggle for me as an advertising, as part of the advertising industry that we always have to stay neutral. But I think now more than ever, kailangan magsalita na lahat. Even brands, even agencies.
And really, I mean, yun nga, I guess it's begs to say that there's really no space to be neutral anymore. Na you have to have a stand at this point, and we should start realizing that. I mean, or at least persuading other people. It might be difficult, but at least we should try na, to get our opinions out there. Kasi yun nga, for example, in the music industry as well, we've already experienced this last year with the Shanty Dope controversy, right? Na what should be in a song, what does a song mean, what does, everything is ano talaga eh, in a stand, there has to be a stand behind everything, and you can't just, yun nga, reiterating the Hamilton aspect of it all. If you don't stand for if you stand for nothing, Burr, what will you fall for, diba? And it's just really the bigger umbrella nga, as Regine, I really like what Regine said about media literacy. And yun nga, we have to recognize also the educational system is a big part of what is happening and how people are responding to it. Because, for example, yun nga, we're lucky enough to understand Hamilton on that level, although it's very evident na yun naman talaga yung Hamilton, di ba? But what other modes of thinking have been perpetuated by other by other institutions for them to think differently, right? I mean, or what kind of media literacy has been provided to those people, if any, for them to not see how things can be political or things have meaning behind them aside from the surface level that everyone sees. So yeah, I mean, aside from that, do you guys want to add anything else about this issue? Because I guess we've pretty much covered a lot of um, issues rooted within what is happening with the ABS-CBN shutdown. So I guess with that, we have pretty much covered what has happened, what we think, relates to it. I guess siguro last question na lang for everyone is what do you think is next and what should we do or continue to do? I mean, we've been saying it earlier as well na, this is just the beginning. So in response to the events, how should we go about this and how should we continue, especially now that, the lockdown hasn't been officially closed yet. We're closing supposedly in a week, but we're not quite sure yet. How do you think we should go about this and how should we move forward, especially that um, this we don't really know when ABS-CBN will be back or if they will be back or who will own them if they will be back. It's a lot of theories and conspiracies then okay, Bongo will just save the day and save ABS-CBN and then all these things, right?
Okay. Can I speak first?
Yeah.
Speaking as an ordinary citizen who is really privileged to be able to access a lot of information online and through other cable networks as well, I'd like to speak for my other like fellow privileged citizens who do enjoy all these luxuries. I do implore them to really support ABS-CBN digitally, especially now, because I think that will be the main focus of their work, of course, of how they can still relay the truth to us, and also how they will be able to potentially not incur as much losses as we probably think they can incur now. I'm pretty sure there's going to be a lot of restructuring towards digital. And I'd like to implore my fellow citizens then to not just be updated with the news and to leave it at that, but to engage with digital posts, to share digital posts, because these numbers actually mean a lot, especially if a company is weighing down how important a digital avenue is. So I think that's the first step that citizens like me can actually do. And essentially, they should just stay vigilant and to not forget about what happened, because what happened is an injustice to everyone.
Siguro for me, I'd I'd ask the question directly to the listeners and ask them to ask themselves, what can you do right now? Ano yung networks mo ba? Ano ba yung talents mo? Ano ba yung meron ka ngayon? Anong pwede mong gawin para makatulong sa kung anong pinapanindigan mo? And this is where I want to thank you, Cholo, for opening up this platform for everyone, opening up your own platform to discuss this issue. And I think your listeners and everyone else can actually contribute in however they can. I guess the challenge now is to go beyond tweets and to go beyond just ranting. Kasi lahat naman ng tao merong kapasidad mag-organize. You can PM everybody, as long as you have a network, you can do something. You can do a project. You can do an online campaign, or you can just kahit nga conversations among ourselves to process it well and to have a plan kung ano yung gagawin once the lockdown ends. Because again, this is not happening in a vacuum. This will continue on. It's in the context of a culture of diminishing the rule of law, diminishing press freedom. So you have to think of how would you want to place yourself in that context, and how can you better, or how can you improve that context? How can you improve this situation in the Philippines? I guess mga menial and the house managing tasks, just tweet with defend press freedom at saka stand with ABS-CBN.
From an advertising perspective, I think for all agencies, we don't always realize just how much impact we have on what our clients want to say and how they say it. So for everyone in an advertising agency right now who have clients that are willing to give out their voice, let's implore these clients with what message is best to send out right now, and just to use our media privileges wisely and for the betterment of Filipinos. So that's me from advertising.
Hi. Okay. So, um, on my end, for sure, just to echo a point raised by Erica earlier, being neutral is not the same as being truthful. And this is something that I think a lot of people still have to realize on some level. So, some things that I plan to do in terms of personal actions, I'll continue to report. I'll definitely continue to do my job as long as I am able and as much as I am able, given this quarantine. I'll continue to follow, retweet, and read reports from the local press and particularly from ABS-CBN. And I encourage the listeners of this show to also do the same. I'm brainstorming some possible options for new spaces or possible initiatives for campus journalists so that we can have non-toxic conversations and possibly, come up with concrete plans for how we can advocate for media literacy in a more informed way. And if you are part of an organization, maybe it's time to speak up, take a stand, add your voice to the chorus of voices that are talking about this. We've seen that our alma mater, the Com department of Ateneo, has come up with its own statement. We also see that campus papers in Ateneo have also weighed in, and they even banded together to come up with a unified statement about this. So maybe that's another way also that we can go about it. Maybe just on the last note, a personal reflection. No? Last night, when ABS-CBN went offline and the screen turned black, I really felt like we were kind of plunged into this darkness and uncertainty, not just in terms of the jobs of the people working in ABS-CBN, but also in terms of the state of press freedom and the state of information for people who need the news the most. But there was something really dystopian and there was something very urgent about the visual of how the screen just turned black after the newscast. Like you wouldn't know when it would go on air again. There was something very striking about that. But at the same time, I'm not sure if it's been as instant as that particular moment. Because we've seen in the past that there was a precedent for this, that this has happened before to Rappler, that the threats against journalists, against other organizations like Inquirer have also taken place before. So I'm not so sure if it's been an instant turning off of the lights as it has been a gradual dimming and then we didn't know na nandito na pala tayo sa kadiliman, you know. But yun, as we say in the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. So as much as possible as reporters, as people working in the media, whether or not you're in journalism, let's try to work in our own ways to shed the light in our own little spots of darkness. Ayun.
And I guess to add to Regine's, my final statement for this show, for this episode, for specifically, yun nga, in this darkness that we are experiencing, I hope everyone becomes a light to each other. Let's continue to be informed, and of course, let's continue to speak up and be in solidarity with our kapamilya, with our fellow media practitioners, with our press, and with everyone. We are with you, to everyone who's affected by this. Of course, we continue to hope and pray for the healing of the people and the world, because through as we go through this corona pandemic as well. And of course, yun nga, I hope we continue to speak up and find platforms to talk about these important matters in our country and in the world as well. And with that, I would like to thank everyone. Thank you, Paula, Erica, Ram, and Reg, for being here in our special panel. It was a really good conversation about it that I hope a lot of people get to listen and get to share with other people as well, because we raised a lot of great points on this episode. Of course, after this episode, we will be continuing with our month-long anniversary special. We will be resuming with our regular programming as well. So you can listen to all our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and we're also on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM. All our video episodes are there. And we are on social media for more updates at Popcorn with Cholo. That's at Popcorn with Cholo. Does anyone want to plug before we go? Magbasa na lang kayo sa reliable source.
Read the news.
Read
Yes.
the news, not the trolls. And I
Yep.
as a light comment, no to NTC and yes to NCT.
Stan NCT. Stan NCT. Stan EXO. Nag-vlog.
Nag-plug ng ano.
I have
Nag-plug
no
ng mga
K-pop
bias.
groups to plug.
So thank you again, guys. We hope to see you again in the next episodes. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us, Cholo.
Sure.
Thank you, Cholo. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
This is your stop for all things pop. Catch our all-around pop culture geek, Cholo Sediaren, as he throws in some dose of what's poppin' and what's hot in the pop culture scene here on Popcorn. Munchin' with us every Thursdays from 4 to 6, only here on Radyo Katipunan 87.9 FM.